In this video, we're going to start with the carabiner pin's barrel bottom, or also known as the pin tip. And within that, the first step we'll start with is creating a new component. So I will call this the barrel bottom, and make sure the component is active to get started. Creating a new sketch on the XZ plane, I can go ahead and I'm going to create a line from the origin, a vertical line at no necessarily determined length, and I'm going to go ahead and make this a center line. So by selecting the line and choosing center line, I'm able to go through and have that. Using two horizontal lines from the end point of the line that I just drew, I'm going to draw them out at an arbitrary length. From here, I can use the dimension tool, the end points of those lines I just drew, and in choosing the second point as the center line, I can go ahead and set up a diameter measurement, and that's what the center line is going to allow us to do. So the length of that line will be, and I'm going to go ahead and drag the dimension up, the end point of this line to the center line will be 0.19, and then the distance between those two lines will be 0.563. All these measurements have been taken utilizing the dial caliper and the carabiner shuttle pin and getting some of those. All right, last thing we'll do to finish out the first feature will be to use a 3-point arc, making sure that we connect to the end points of the lines and setting in the curvature. At any time you see I run the dimension tool without clicking on it, I'm using the D key on the keyboard. So once I press D, I can then go through and run that. And this is going to have a radius of 1.5. I'm going to go ahead and finish the sketch. Put this in the isometric orientation, revolve with the center line in there. The revolve command will automatically pick up that as the center axis to revolve around, and we can go ahead and say OK. So this gives us the start for our particular pin, and then now we can go ahead and take a look at creating our next feature, which is going to be an offset plane from this particular plane here. So we're going to have a distance of 13/16, and we go ahead and we set in the work plane. So 13 divided by 16 in there. I'm going to go ahead and create a sketch on the back face of the previous model that we created. And this diameter circle that I will create is going to be 0.465. I'm going to go ahead and finish the sketch, but I'm going to go ahead and create a new sketch onto the work plane that was just created. The circle that I will create, setting it on this center origin, I'm going to purposely draw this a little bit larger, but also I can go ahead and set this to be 0.560. When I hit enter, this will set in those two circles. From here, I will loft, and making sure to choose my circle from here and choosing my circle here on the opposite side to create that particular shape. Once I've gone through and had this, I'm going to create, there's a little bit of a lip edge that exists on the pin. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new sketch, click on the end here. Choosing a circle, it's a little bit larger than the previous by 0.57. And then I'm going to go ahead and finish the sketch. Extruding the shape, I will zoom in really close here. There's a really thin extrusion that is also picked up that we need to also select within our two profiles. And we need to extrude this 0.075. So it's a small extrusion here to go through and provide our place where the pin grip can be held into place. From here, we can go ahead and create a new sketch plane here on the end. Our circle is going to go back to the previous diameter of 0.560. We can now finish the sketch, and extrude that, just the circle that and within the circle we just created, 0.375. With this, we're also going to go ahead and shell. So I'll choose this end, and I will also choose the opposite end of the pin, and we're going to shell this to be 0.035 of shell distance. So that will give us to remove that, and it will hollow out our part here. So there's what we should be able to see on the inside. Our last step will be to create threads as well as to change the appearance. So I'm going to go ahead and go to create, choosing thread. I can now go ahead with what faces. I can choose the end of the pin, and looking at the size, we're actually going to go to a 9/16, changing the pitch. The pitch is a little too high by the default. The pitch here is going to be 0.05, what's the distance, or that would be 20, and that's kind of what we're seeing there. So we're going to go to 9/16-20, and we're going to go to a 2A style thread, and then go through and have those modeled and say OK. So now here's the threading for our pin tips that would go into the barrel, and here would end up being the final steps for that. Last thing before we finish out the video will be, I'm going to right click on the component name. Let's go ahead and change the physical material, and we're going to look under a plastic. This type of plastic, we're probably just going to be able to go through and find, there's actually just a regular plastic within here. So I'm going to just grab it and drop it onto the component. And then if we want to as well, right click and change the appearance, I can go ahead and select the white glossy appearance and drop it onto the component. And that will give us our starting of our carabiner pin. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the save button. With this, I would end up calling this the barrel bottom, and I've already created a project within Fusion and within my data panel to save all of these parts and components. So the barrel bottom will be here, and I can go ahead and hit save, and now I'm ready to move on to the next component, which will be the pin grip. Check out the next video in order to see how that will be created.